Great, thank you. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant and authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca and you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. When you call in, staff will ask for your name and item number that you wish to address and your telephone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, you will have to press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for the presentation. You will have to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes are at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for every presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes are also at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns, particularly within staff reports and the proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussions. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications to the agent and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. Last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, and public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November of 2022, Bill 23 legislation, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights to members of the public. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes binding and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People attending this meeting and participating have to be courteous to and respectful to all members of the committee, town staff, and any other person participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. We have one regret this evening, Mr. John Hardcastle. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interests? I see none. Thank you. Madam Secretary-Treasurer, have anyone raised their hand or called in with respect to deferring or withdrawing an applications? At this time, if you are in the audience and you wish to withdraw or defer an application, please raise your hand and the Secretary-Treasurer will invite you into the panel to speak.
I'm showing no hands and no calls, Madam Chair.
Very well. Okay, thank you. We'll take the first item on our agenda, and that's the consent application B23-11. Mr. Talowski, did you have your hand up?
I did, Madam Chair. Before we start the committee, when I did my site visit, there was no sign posted at 1111 Pine Grove Road.
That's application A. Is this a typo?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it's CAV 007 of 2024, correct?
2025.
Sorry, 2025. Okay. And so CAV 007 of 2025 at 1111 Pine Grove Road. Welcome to the first application of the 2025 year. I forgot to say Happy New Year to everyone. Okay, Mr. Talowski, is the agent for this application present? Sunrooms of the GTA, Four Seasons Sunrooms of the GTA, Syed Ahmed.
He's here, Madam Chair. I'll just let him into the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, committee members.
Good evening.
My name is Syed Ahmed from Lifestyle Sunrooms.
Is your camera on, sir, or can you turn it on?
I got my audio on. You want video on as well?
Yes, if you do have video, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, let me turn that on. Sure. I clicked that on.
Okay, that's fine. Pursuant to our bylaws, if the signage has not been on the correct facing for the public to have ample notice, we have no choice but to defer this application. And you have to make sure that your signage is properly placed and does not get...
I'm really sorry. Yeah, just 1 second. I was trying to log in somehow. I was sitting here from almost like a 20 or 6:30, and I was just watching the whole meeting from the beginning. I have no idea what happened that I didn't get connected. So I appreciate if we can go ahead with my application for the night.
No, it's not about your presence, sir. It's about the fact that when our committee members visited the site, the sign that you were given by the Secretary Treasurer to put in was not placed there. It was missing. So that means that the public did not have enough notice for the number of days that it's required to have the signage up. And therefore, we have to defer your application.
Okay, I'm sorry to say that I was myself actually went there and put the sign up, took the pictures, and also sent the picture to the Committee of Adjustment.
Yeah, I'm sure that you did, and I'm sure the Secretary Treasurer can corroborate that. But unfortunately, with winter season, we've given ample notice to all our applicants that
Right.
there's circumstances where the sign will go down and it's your responsibility that it stays up for the duration of the time. So we have no idea when it was blown away or when it came down, and that's why we have to defer. I'm not really asking, I'm just informing you, and
Okay.
that there will be a fee for the deferral that you are responsible for. And just make sure that next time your sign is there and is maintained by the applicant at all times.
Okay, I appreciate that. But any idea like when we are going to have our application
You'll
back
have to
on?
see the, yeah, you'll have to see the secretary treasurer at the time after this meeting. You'll and check in with her when she can get you in to the next available meeting.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Sorry to
thank
hear
you.
that. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
So, members, all those in support of a deferral. Okay, the application has been deferred. We will see you as soon as the secretary brings you back on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Did I miss any other hands?
We have no other hands, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we will start with the first item on our agenda, and that is consent application B2311 at 1280 Dundas Street West. Again, that's B3211 at 1280 Dundas Street West. Mr. Kamal here as the agent. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Oz Kamal. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning. I see my presentations up on the screen, so thank you, committee staff, for that. I'm here on behalf of the owner of the subject land, St. Vladimir's Cathedral of Toronto, for the property located at 1280 Dundas Street West. Representatives from St. Vladimir's Cathedral are in attendance at this meeting. Also in attendance are representatives from Del Manor and Del Terra, the builder and operator of the proposed seniors community. They're all here to help answer any questions the committee may have at the end of this presentation. I'd like to start by thanking staff and regional staff for working with us on this application. We reviewed the staff report and generally agree with the recommendations. Next slide, please. The subject lands are approximately 27 hectares in total area. It's the area that's that's highlighted in red there with the solid red line. The subject lands have frontage on a number of roads with a lot frontage of approximately 61.4 meters on Dundas, which is paper left. In addition to Dundas Street West, the subject lands also abut Fourth Line and Proudfoot Trail. Fourth Line is divided into two quadrants and are connected by a pedestrian walkway, that's paper north, running east-west along 16 Mile Creek there. The north section of Fourth Line, which is the closest to the left, has approximately 475 meters of frontage along the subject lands, and the south section has approximately 460 meters. There is approximately 283 meters of frontage on Proudfoot Trail, which is at the bottom right of your screen there. The subject lands are currently occupied by St. Vladimir's Cultural Center and Cemetery. The northeast quadrant of the subject lands is currently vacant and upon which the Del Manor Seniors Community is proposed. And you can see that dashed in red in the northwest page of on your screen. Abutting the subject lands are Dundas Street West and White Oaks Communication Limited radio towers to the north, which is on the far left off screen. 16 Mile Creek natural area to the northeast, which is on, you can see that on the screen on the north end, and single family homes which surround the south and west portions of the site. Next slide, please. The subject lands have been thoroughly reviewed through a number of development applications with the town of Oakville to facilitate the future development of the senior citizens community. These applications include a ZBA, a zoning bylaw amendment, an application to permit the Senior Citizens Community Center was submitted December 2020. The application was appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and upon settlement with the town, region, and conservation authority, received approval from the OLT in May 2023, subject to conditions. Those conditions were fulfilled, and the final OLT order was issued in September 2023. The bylaw will be refined following approval of this consent application so that the required setbacks can be established. There is also a site plan application. This application was submitted in October 2022 to facilitate the seniors community. The design of the proposal will be finalized through the SPA application process. Finalizing the SPA, the site plan approval, requires the development lot be created so we can proceed to the site plan agreements. That takes us to this consent application. So the proposed consent application is intended to create the development parcel to facilitate the proposed senior community as per the OLT order, and to facilitate the financing and eventual construction of the project. Next slide, please. Just a high-level overview of the policies. So the official plan, subject lands have 2 land use designations identified in the official plan. There's a private open space with site-specific exception, and also a natural area. The site-specific exception within the private open space specifically allows for seniors housing. The zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 2414 as amended, has 4 zone designations identified in the current zoning bylaw. The retained lands, which is the lands that are the cultural center and cemetery, are zoned open space 2 with special provision 122, which is what permits the existing use. The cemetery portion of the site is zoned cemetery, and then the natural area portion of the retained lands is zoned natural area. The severed lands, which will be where the proposed seniors community portion is of the site, is also zoned open space 2 with special provision 426, which is as approved by the OLT. And that site-specific exception allows for retirement homes, long-term care facilities, and townhouse dwellings associated with a retirement home to bring that whole continuum of care to this area. There's also a zone of natural area for the severed lands for the natural area portion of the site. Next slide, please. So the proposal seeks to sever the northeast quadrant of the subject lands between 16 Mile Creek and St. Vladimir's Cultural Center for a seniors community. Again, the retained lands are identified on the consent sketch provided with this application. The retained lot is identified as Part 4 and will have approximately 61.4 meters of frontage along Dundas Street. The retained lands are shown in red here, and they're, again, currently occupied by St. Vladimir's Cultural Center and the cemetery. Now, the severed lands consist of 3 parts. There's parts 1, 2, and 3, and will have approximately 161 meters of frontage along 4th line. Part 1 is the developable area of the severed lot in which the proposed seniors community will be developed. It's approximately 3.3 hectares. Parts 2 and 3 comprise of a natural area. You can see that in green there, and that on the severed lands, which will be conveyed back to the town of Oakville, and that's approximately 1.3 hectares. Next slide, please. This slide just provides a more zoomed in image of the severance portion of the site. So part 1 is highlighted there in yellow, and parts 2 and 3 highlighted in green. Approximately 1/3 of the site, of the overall severed site, is going to be conveyed back to the town to help preserve the natural area. The delineated areas that you see on the screen have been discussed and determined in collaboration with the town of Oakville, Halton Region, and Conservation Halton through the OLT process. Next slide, please. We also had a chance to review the comments through the staff report, the public comments. The majority of the comments seemed to be around what was being severed and clarity in that respect. We note that the 60-meter notification area is a Planning Act requirement. The actual development lands are approximately 150 meters away from the nearest home. Some of the other comments were noting that they didn't think that the development was permitted. But as I noted, there is a site-specific policy that allows the seniors community, and the zoning was settled with the town at the OLT to help implement that OP policy. This is also consistent with the town staff report, which is supportive of the severance application. Again, I'd like to thank town staff and regional staff for working with us on this application. We reviewed the staff report and agree with the recommendations. We respectfully request approval of the consent application with the conditions in the report, which will facilitate much needed seniors housing in Oakville. And our team is here happy to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed severance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamal. Are there any questions of Mr. Kamal at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Didn't see in the in your reports or in the planning report exactly what's going on, but I did see a sign on the property that seems to indicate it's going to be 315 apartments in an 8-story building. It seemed to say there was going to be 27 other units in 5-story buildings, but I don't know if I've got that correct, and I wonder if you can just correct that for me.
Sure. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a seniors community building built. That's an 8-story building. That building will have approximately 315 units in it. And then along the periphery, there will also be townhouse units, but we call them independent living units for seniors. These are units where the residents are more independent, so they still have full kitchens and things of that nature and can come and go as they please, but still have all of the amenities of the main building. Over time, what may occur is people who originally lived in the independent living units may need additional assistance and then would move into the 8-story building where there's more assistance available there.
Go ahead.
Again, the townhouse units, how many are there, and how tall are they? Like 2-story or 5-story?
There are 24 units. They're approximately 1.5 stories with garage. So they're essentially like a 2-story unit. There's a small stair inside for the upper level.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I see none. I do note that you addressed many of the concerns that came in the letters of objections. I will, however, state them on record. We have letters of objection from Mr. Dustin Small, Jean Dernois, Ryan Bellamy, Andrew Ian, Nikki, and Tony Much. And is there anyone in the audience who has raised their hand to speak to this matter or called with respect to this matter, Madam Secretary?
Madam Chair, we have one hand. I will move them in.
Okay.
Mr. Fred Fairs.
Go ahead, Mr. Fairs.
Okay, we on? Just some questions, and really, I'm on Falcon Crescent, and just a couple of questions for Oz, and I guess 3 items that I guess the people on our street have asked. You said the main building will be 8 stories. Can I ask you? I assume that the plans for the building would be the main floor be an atrium, and probably on the upper floor there'll be some HVAC. So really, be 8 stories, but it might actually be 9 stories high. Would I be right in saying that?
Go ahead and ask all 3 of your questions, and then we'll have Mr. Kamal respond.
Okay. The other question is, I know there's a pond on 4th line, almost really fronting Highway 5. When I asked the question before, I guess the consensus was that the pond had been created by a farmer. All I would ask, and just because of the environmental, I guess, concern, but is there any way that we could protect that pond rather than just fill it in with dirt and cover it with asphalt? That's a question I would ask for you. And then the other one was, there was a concern back a while ago in, I believe, a public school or an elementary school was going to be built north of Highway 5, and there was concerns about the transmissions from the radio towers. Has that all gone away? Has that been rectified, or can you ask that question? Just really, those are the questions that the people here are asking.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Kamal.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions. So the proposal is for an 8-story building. There is a mechanical penthouse on top of that, but there's no intended use above 8 stories. So there's going to be 8 stories for the majority, and then there would just be a mechanical penthouse, which covers your elevator overruns, mechanical HVAC, stuff like that. So it is an 8-story building.
Yeah, I understand.
We worked extensively on the rezoning. In order to get the rezoning, we needed the clearance from the radio communications people. We entered into an agreement with them, so we were able to rectify those issues. It just involved an agreement and just recognizing some alternate construction practices when the time comes for construction, so as to not interfere with their radio signals, which we will be abiding by once we have site plan approval and permits for the site. The pond is not proposed to be maintained. It can't be maintained because what we're trying to do is frame, as part of this application, we've been working with urban design, and one of the things was framing the building, the main 8-story building, along the 4th line and the curve. So you have like a building that kind of does this. So it goes like this, and this part would be where that pond is. So the intent is that the pond would be removed. It wasn't. It was a man-made pond based on our historical research, and we've been working with staff and for engineering solutions, and we're just about there. We just have to create the lot now to just kind of finalize the site plan approval. So the pond is not going to be retained.
Yeah, okay. Disappointing, but okay, I understand. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate your answers.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Those are great questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Has anyone else raised their hand, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, we have no more hands.
Very well. If the committee members don't have any follow-up questions, we can take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll move that this severance be approved as applied for, finding that it complies with provincial policy, provisions of the Planning Act, and I would note that the lot's being created for a use that's already permitted. And I would make that approval subject to the conditions found within Appendix A.
Very well.
Also, Madam Chair, I'd note that there were 5 letters of objection, 1 participant with a series of questions. I believe that the applicant has adequately addressed those concerns.
Very well. Thank you. All those in support of the motion? All those opposed? Susan, I have to be able to see your hand, so if you can just, okay, perfect. Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have a second consent application, and this consent is B2411 at 74 Howard Avenue. Again, that's B2411 at 74 Howard Avenue. There are 6 letters of support for this application, and from Ms. Jeanette Stern, Christopher Dunning, Lisa Switzer, Chow Zon Sun, Candace Cheryl, Whitney, Gino Catalini, and there's 1 letter of opposition from a Miss Rita and Mr. Frank Peters. We have Mr. Paul Demchek representing this applicant. Go ahead.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Paul Demchek with Vittori Planning and Management, the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 74 Howard. Next slide, please. So the subject site measures approximately 1,548 square meters. It's an interior lot with 30.48 meters of frontage on 74 Howard. And the site is obviously currently occupied by a 2-story single detached dwelling, as well as detached garage on the south side yard, as well as a number of border trees that surround the site. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this application is to sever the property to create one new residential lot and one retained lot, both obviously with frontages on Howard Avenue, and the owners further seek to construct a new detached dwelling on each of the retained and severed lots. Next slide, please. And for each proposed dwelling, it's intended that the built form of the dwellings is to fully comply with the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So this includes all setbacks, height, coverage, and all applicable built form standards that exist within the bylaw. I will note that the southern lot will retain the existing driveway entrance and also features additional indentations on the southern side lot line to the dwelling, which helps to ensure that trees are protected to the greatest extent possible. And you can see some of those indentations on this site plan. The northern lot will utilize a new driveway entrance located on the southern side of this lot, which assists in mitigating impacts to some of the existing trees and specifically the town trees where possible. Also, I will note that the front yard setbacks for both dwellings are designed to generally align with the adjacent properties. Next slide, please. This is just a streetscape image shown on this slide. It's intended to demonstrate how the proposed dwellings are obviously to fit in with the existing context of the street and specifically among the adjacent properties. Next slide, please. These are the renderings that have been prepared to show what the dwellings will look like in terms of the architecture and placement of the dwelling on Howard Avenue. Again, the height of the dwellings are both under 9 meters. And again, each dwelling complies with the built form requirements of the zoning bylaw. Obviously, from a materiality perspective, the architect has gone to efforts to demonstrate a lot of the materials that you see within this immediate context, and those are provided in these images. Next slide. Just in terms of tree protection, I will note that obviously I have had an opportunity to review the comments, and there was one letter of objection, and they noted concerns about tree removals. So I will just like to highlight that the dwellings, again, have been designed to mitigate impacts on trees to the greatest extent possible. My client, as part of this application, has submitted an arborist report to the town. And as you can see, the majority of the 44 trees that are located on and adjacent to the subject site are being protected. And the proposal only requires the removal of 5 trees to accommodate this development. Next slide, please. Just briefly for planning context, the official plan designates the site as low density residential. And I will note that there was no special policy overlay in this instance. Next slide, please. The subject site is zone RL3 O Suffolk zone. As noted, no variances are required for the proposed dwellings. However, a single variance is required for the required lot frontage noted in the zoning bylaw to support, obviously, the proposed consent. Next slide. And so this variance is for a reduction to the required lot frontage to permit 15.2 meters for each respective lot, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum of 18 meters. Next slide, please. So in support of the consent application, and this is outlined in detail in my planning rationale, we completed an analysis of the immediate neighborhood context and lot fabric to outline these lots that were studied, which is obviously outlined in purple. So just for the benefit of the committee, the public, a total of 38 lots were analyzed in this study area. The subject site has one of the largest lot frontages and lot areas within the Howard Avenue study area context. Obviously, again, with a frontage of just over 30 meters and a lot area of over 1,500 square meters. So the proposed severance, again, results in a retained and severed lot with frontages of 15.28 meters and lot areas of just over 773 square meters. Just for some brief statistics on this, 18 of the 38 lots, or 47% of them, have a lot frontage that is less than the required 18 meters frontage noted in the zoning bylaw. And the proposed frontages for both parts are greater in frontage than 12 of the 38 lots within the immediate vicinity of the subject site. And further, the proposed lot area for parts 1 and 2 are greater in lot area than 19 of the 38 lots within this study area context. So just in terms of the intent of the minimum lot frontage, it's intended to ensure that the general pattern and character of lots within a given neighborhood is maintained. And the existing lot frontage within this immediate neighborhood vary considerably based on my analysis. And based on this analysis and submitted within my rationale, the proposed lots are compatible with the character of lots on Howard Avenue in this context. The variances will not negatively impact the existing neighborhood lot fabric, and the proposed variances also represent frontage that is observed within this immediate neighborhood. In summary, next slide, please. I will note that we have received 6 letters of support and we did receive 1 letter of objection. My client has made an effort to speak to the majority of their immediate neighbors and have also spoken with the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association regarding this application. They have been residents of this neighborhood and this house for 28 years and obviously wanted to ensure that their neighbors were adequately aware of the application. So as such, I would recommend to the committee that the application meets the 4 tests and the consent application meets the Planning Act requirements and does represent good planning. Before the committee, would be happy to assist and answer any questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demchak. Are there any questions of the applicant at this time? Items of clarification? I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We have no calls and no hands, Madam Chair.
Okay, very well. Then we'll take the matter into committee, and I'll just ask that whoever moves this motion consider the variances that are attached to these lots for the minimum frontage. So who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose we go for the seventh or consent application first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Based on my review of the owner's application, site plan, my site visit, presentation by the owner's consultant, the planning staff's report, having regard to the neighbor's support, letters of support, and of course one in opposition, I am satisfied that the development complies with the 7th criteria of the Planning Act, and I put forth a motion that the application as applied for the 7th, or I should say consent, be approved, subject to the condition. They're just conditions with planning.
Appendix A, conditions of approval.
Thank you. And with regard to the variances.
Oh, let's move that one first. Let's move the consent first.
Yep.
Okay, so the proposed motion is that we approve the consent application that is before us today at 74 Howard Avenue. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Now that we have consent, we'll take variance application CEV 150 of 2024 for the retained land part 1. Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm satisfied that the variance for that property is minor in nature and conforms to the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I put forth a motion that the application applied for be approved, subject to the condition that the owner.
Yeah, they've received approval, so that meets the condition.
Oh, okay, it meets that condition. Okay, sorry, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Now we move on to CAV
Thank you, Mayor.
151. Sorry. Still one more, Mr. Demchek. Still one more.
My apologies. I got excited.
Yeah, that's okay. CAV 151 of 2024 for the Part 2 severed lands. And that's also another variance for the minimum frontage. Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm satisfied that the variance for reduced frontage for this property is minor in nature and conforms to the four tests under the Planning Act. And I put forth a motion that the application as applied for be approved, subject to the same conditions.
Yep.
Oh yeah, we've passed the consent. Thank you.
Very well. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay, have a great night.
You too. Okay. Minor variance application, first one of 2025. Woohoo! CAV 001 of 2025, and that's at 242 Sunrise Crescent. Good evening, Mr. Crothers. Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is David Crothers from Crothers and Associates of 505 York Boulevard in Hamilton, Ontario. I'm here as the agent on behalf of the owners to ask for approval under subsection 45 of the Planning Act for the one variance as outlined in the consolidated report. I've read through the planning staff report, which include the following. The planning staff's no objection to the development and the no objections from the region and other various outside agencies. I've also read development engineering's condition that a site alteration permit will be required. As part of our application, I provided a justification report outlining our ideas, and I just kind of want to touch on the four tests in my presentation. Number one, the variance is minor in nature. The minor variance will help facilitate a new custom home project in Oakville that is consistent and compatible with the existing community built form character. Majority of the development was carefully designed to stay within the parameters of the bylaw. And this one variance is required due to house design and is a minor departure from what is currently permitted. There are no combination of any other variances that will result in the overbuilding on the subject property to the detriment of the community. The variance is desirable for the appropriate use of the land. It is my opinion that the proposal will maintain compatibility with the surrounding area and will facilitate additional living space on the property without creating any excessive additional massing impacts. And overall, it's my opinion that this variances have been designed to be complementary and will provide appropriate development and desirable with the subject lands. Number three, does the variance meet the intent and purpose of the official plan? The subject property is designated low density residential of the livable Oakville plan. And the intent of the low density residential is to facilitate a range of permitted low density housing types, including single detached dwellings. The proposed dwelling has been designed to be complementary in recent and existing development forms in the neighborhood, including similar features providing a high quality character design. Given this, and the proposal will provide a built form massing that'll integrate with the neighborhood and its transitioning character of some of the other neighboring properties up and down the street. And number four, does the variance meet the intent and purpose of the bylaw? And I guess the general purpose and intent of the bylaw is to implement the policies of the OP through specific permissions and regulations. And in our case, the L3-0, the low density residential, it regulates the maximum lot coverage to prevent a dwelling from having a mass and scale that appears larger than the dwellings in the surrounding area, and to mitigate any potential grading and drainage impacts from decreased permeability. So again, the home has been designed as a single-story dwelling, done on purpose to help mitigate any potential impacts that its massing will have on its neighbors. The requested 3.2% increase in the coverage is a result of the design, as the owners require additional space for their principal bedroom to be on the main floor with direct access to the rear amenities. At the same time, it's important to note that although we are asking for an increase in lot coverage, our residential floor area remains well under the maximum limit, and we're not encroaching any, excuse me, any closer to the side, front, or rear setbacks, and we remain under the height. Again, any concerns that the additional lot coverage may have on the lot drainage will be required will require approval and be addressed by development engineering through the site alteration permit. Already a professional grading and drainage plan has been designed with no concerns from our engineers. In conclusion, it is my opinion that the requested variances satisfy the 4 tests of Section 45(1) of the Planning Act. It is minor in nature and appropriate for the development and use of the lands, and maintains the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. Are there any questions or items of clarification at this time? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We've had no calls and no hands, Madam Chair.
Very well, I'll take a motion then. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application, site plans, building elevations, etc., together with a site visit, presentation by the owner's consultant, and the planning staff's report, I'm satisfied that the variances are minor in nature and conforms to the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I put forth a motion that the application applied for be approved, subject to the condition that dwelling be constructed in general accordance with submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated October 7th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? See none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.
Application CAV 002 of 2025 at 268 Robinson Street. And that's again CAV 002 of 2025 at 268 Robinson Street. We have 2 letters of support from Mr. Greg Heitman and Louise Fortier.
Good afternoon or good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm just letting the camera on here. Shows up. There it is. So.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Hicks. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So there's actually 2 applications, one following the other. This is for a semi-detached property on Robinson Street on the south side, which backs onto the Heritage District. The variances, I'll go through each one of them individually. If I can go to the next slide, that's just a rendering of the front of it. It is an existing 2-story semi-detached building that's on the site. It did have some historical interest. We've worked with the Heritage Committee and with the town, and it was not listed as a designated property, but they're quite happy with the way that we've approached it, where we've kept the front face of the existing semi, and then we've added an addition to the back of it. This was really just to show some of the context of the immediate neighborhood. There are 4-story, 5-story buildings in the immediate area. There's a new 3-story, 3.5-story building that's been built immediately to the east of it. There's another semi-detached building that's immediately to the west of it. I can go to the next slide. This site plan shows both properties. I think this 002 is for 268 Robinson, which is the one on the right side. We're asking for variances for coverage, front yard setback, rear yard setback, side yards, and parking space size. Now, we are keeping a portion of the existing building. So the variances that related to front yard really relate to the existing condition, but zoning wanted us to treat it as a new application. So specifically for 268, the part that's shown in yellow is the existing building. We are maintaining that front side. We've got a small front porch that sits on there, so we require a front yard setback variance because the existing house and the existing front porch exceed that minimum requirement, so that we're not making any change to that. So just preserving that and improving the building space. The building is shown in yellow, the part that's at the gray, we are adding on to the back of it. We require a rear yard setback, which relates to a covered porch, which is found in the lighter colored back here. The back of the existing porches, etc., lines up with about the back of the second floor of the proposed addition to it. We have to ask for a variance for a reduced parking space size that's at the front of the property. The width, there is room for 2 cars to park there. They have parked 2 cars there for a while, and the residents beside it parks cars in their front yard as well. And then the coverage for the site, they've asked for a coverage restriction of 57 versus the 30 or 35% that's permitted on the site. That's the coverage for the 2 lots, and that's how zoning wanted it to be expressed, even though 270 is a slightly wider lot than 268. So, and then there's a side yard setback where we are keeping the width of the house at the street, but we are increasing the width of it back here to a minimum as noted. This particular lot, for some reason, requires a 3-meter side yard setback. Everything else in the street requires a 1.2-meter setback. We have, if I can go to the next slide, we've tried to work within those constraints as best as we possibly can. The red areas that are shown on this plan show the setback variances for the rear yard, which really just respect the covered porch. So it's a 1-story covered porch. And as I said, the variances at the front relate to the covered porch that's here and the existing face of the building. The coverage, most of the restrictions related to the increased coverage are because of the back covered porch and because of the front covered porches. One of the reasons we have the back covered porch in here is that there is a new 3-story building that's built immediately to the east of this. We want to cover that porch to maintain privacy because there's a number of windows that overlook that property coming down into this backyard. That'll be discussed more under the 270 application. The residence actually at 270 is actually my own residence, so I'm moving into this in fact myself. So I can go to the next slide. That just showed the, actually flip to the next one. That just shows how the building steps back as you're coming from the rear lot line, which faces into the heritage. That's the 1-story covered porch. There's a 2nd story here, which is essentially in line with the houses to the east and to the west. And then there's a smaller 3rd story section that's through here. And this shows how we've preserved the front face of the building. We have spoken to residents on both sides and behind. There are 2 letters of support. We've read planning's documents, and certainly I know that they are supportive of the application and feel it is appropriate. It does meet the 4 tests. We tried to get in touch with the 3 residents that have not yet occupied the building to the east, but we did talk to their builder, and he said that they didn't have any concerns, but they hadn't sent a letter in. And seems to be supported by everyone else in the community that we have delivered packages to. So I think in closing on 268 and similar to 270, that we find the variances are minor. They're certainly in conformance with the official plan. There are 2 units there right now, and we're going to maintain those 2 units. The full size of the units is about 2,600 to 2,700 square feet, so they're not excessively large. The preservation of the front face of the building preserves the streetscape. The building has been stepped back at the back to preserve any impact on neighbors' properties. It's well treed at the back property line, so we don't have any concerns with that. We certainly think it meets the intent of the bylaw. If we go to the next slide, I'll show you just in the, might be 2 or 3 slides down here. That's just the back elevation of it, showing again how it steps back. Go to the next. slide. Actually, carry on and I'll tell you when to stop. That's just the back garden. And next, past that one, that's front elevation, and that one, and the next one. And there's one that shows an area context map. That's it there. And then if we carry on to the next one, the properties that we're looking at are behind that large tree, but that's just a study of the existing context of the existing area. The ones that are highlighted in blue all exceed 60% coverage, including the one that's beside us. And these ones, these are townhomes, they all exceed the 60% coverage. In fact, they're higher than what we are. And it's really considered a transitional zone in terms of the separation between the higher density on Robinson Street and the lower density of the Heritage District. So we are preserving as many of the trees on the property as possible. I think there's only one that's coming down, or two that are coming down in the total for the two properties. So we believe that it meets all the four tests and certainly seems to be supported. We did present this verbally and on the phone and in a Zoom call to the local ratepayers of the area. They had no objections to it, so that I'm aware of. So, and I think with that, I'll leave it open for questions from the committee itself. So thank you.
Very well. Thank you. Questions to Mr. Hicks, if there are any. Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just have 3 questions or matters that I'm concerned about to some degree. Let's start with the side yard. You mentioned that side yard setback, zoning bylaw requires a 3.0 meter setback, and I agree that normally setbacks side yards are 1.2. Any further explanation on logic as to why the 3.0 meter would have been required?
I wish I had an explanation for that. I think even zoning was surprised when they found it, but there is a special section that referenced back and changed the coverage and the side yard setbacks, but it only really applied to those 2 lots where the semis are, and the one that's beside us has a less than a 1.2 meter side yard. So I would like to explain it, but I haven't received that explanation from planning. So they seem to support it. They don't think there's any concerns. Fire has no issues with the side yard setbacks either. So,
second question: in the I guess it's the site plan.
yes,
it seems to go through and go through the footprint. It is relative to lot coverage, as I understand it. You've got the footprint, the front porch, the rear porch, and the covered area, big property. And it seems to add up to 132 square meters, which isn't anywhere near our 57%. I don't quite understand that 57%.
Well, what zoning has asked us to do is that each of the lots individually would have slightly different coverages. So they said, because it's a semi, regardless of it being owned by 2, they want the coverage expressed as the total of the coverage of the 2 units on the entire lot. So those numbers, and actually the one thing, because we were dealing with 268, 270 has an existing carport that's also there that increases the coverage on that particular lot. So that's one of the reasons for the perhaps discrepancy, but it is the 57% or 57.43% is the exact number that it's worked out to, and that's been confirmed with zoning in terms of what has to be included. But again, it's a bit of a discrepancy between one and the other, because the other one does have an existing covered car garage or carport on the side, which requires a side yard variance for it as well. So.
Okay, thank you. One more question, if I may. You seem to just indicate in your presentation now that the front wall of the building is being preserved. Well, in the renderings, I don't quite see what you mean there. So maybe you look at it, you know, what the existing structure is, front wall, and what your proposed is, it doesn't look at all the same to me. So I'm just wondering what you're actually saying there.
Well, they look different, but the foundation's preserved, the front face of the building preserved, right back to the slope where the roof meets the 3rd story at the back. The windows are different, but specifically we've kept that roof line and the porch. We've expanded the porch on 270, which is the next application. But Heritage and the neighbors have been very happy with the fact that we have preserved that, and even the local ratepayers said that yes, it's not identical. We're not trying to preserve any heritage characteristics of it because there's virtually nothing left of the original heritage house. So yes, it's a different color, but we do still have a front door and a punched window in the front, and we don't have any dormers that project down through the eave line. So we did go through some modifications as we worked with Carolyn in planning department and the heritage thing. So no, you're correct. It doesn't look identical, but the proportion of it and where it sits from the street, the height of the roof, etc., is exactly identical to what's there right now. So,
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one hand. 1 minute, I'll move her in. Miss Corrine Breen.
Go ahead, Ms. Corrine.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes, go ahead.
Awesome. I thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Hicks, and I appreciate you sending the package. I am in the property behind, so to the south of 268, 263 William Street. So we share backyards.
okay, yes.
And I had 3 questions. Sorry, I didn't send my emails earlier. But just did them tonight, and I apologize for that. But 3 questions I have. One of them was relatively dealt with it, and that is the height. We're going from a 2-story to a 3-story, and I presume that it is within the height requirements. There was no request to exceed the usual height requirements.
That's correct. It is actually well under the height requirement. So it does permit a 3-story building on any of those properties there. So.
My second concern was the balconies in the back that look onto our backyards, and so concerned about privacy in the same manner that you're concerned about privacy in 270, wanting to have the covered porch and wanting to have privacy from the new build on the corner to the east of you. And so that to me is a concern, and clearly there's no variance that was asking for those balconies.
No.
But they do look down onto both my property and the property that backs onto 270.
What you'll find is that the 3rd floor, which is where those terraces are substantially set back from where our back covered porch is, probably a distance of 12, 18, 20 feet further back. So we've specifically raised a low wall around those so that it gives privacy. We knew that that would be a possible concern from the back. But we have a landscaped area on that 3rd floor terrace that's going to landscape the edges of it. And then we've got a low wall that sits on top of that to give privacy for ourselves and for others. In both floors, I mean, mine comes off of a studio. It's probably not used very much. On that case, the one at 268 is a little bit larger, but it comes off of a bedroom. So again, it's not a entertainment balcony. That's on the main floor, essentially. But we have specifically tried to screen those from there, and we're preserving in 270, we are preserving the trees, so it's fairly well treed. So are you to the east or to the west of the back corner?
I join onto 268.
Okay, so yeah.
Yes, so on the west, to the west of the entire property, and I have like about 12 feet across the back. Yeah. And so then that brings me to my 3rd question, and that is, I presume that when it's time for fencing, that will also be discussed, so that I'm not left with checkerboard of fences in my backyard. I share with 6 properties on my backyard. And so
Right.
that consistency for me clearly is very important.
And we had that discussion with our immediate neighbor, which backs more onto your property at 266, I guess it is.
6, yes.
And we are going to be replacing the fence between those properties. We're doing some landscaping jointly between the properties. And I haven't looked specifically at that 12 feet of your back corner, but we will make sure that there's consistency in it. I'm not saying we'll replace the entire, whatever the length of 100 feet of fence is, but we will work together with you to make sure that it's compatible. So their desire for privacy would be the same as yours. And again,
Yeah, again,
I'm right now.
I'm looking for consistency. On the far corner of my property, they have put in a fence that's horizontal against the vertical.
Right.
And again, I don't want this patchwork fencing of vertical and horizontal fencing.
We will work with you to make sure it's consistent. If yours is already started as vertical or horizontal, we'll do the same. So
awesome.
I'm not sure what the one to the east of us is doing because they've got a parking garage that sits down below us. So I'm not even sure if they have a fence on their property. So, but the back fence line will definitely be made consistent. So, and we're happy to work directly with you. So
awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Breen. Is there anyone else who had items of concern or questions, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We have no more hands and no more calls, Madam Chair.
Very well. Then we'll take the matter into committee with respect to a CAV 002 of 2025 at 268 Robinson Street. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, you just want the one motion at the time, or would you like 2 consecutive ones?
Yes, please.
Just the one. Hopefully, we won't make Mr. Hicks go through the same presentation again.
No, there's only one different variant, so that was it. So,
Madam Chair, I move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I believe this is largely a modernization of what exists on the site today. I would note the 2 letters of support and 1 delegation with a series of questions, which I believe Mr. Hicks has answered, but maybe just for clarification to the question on the privacy in the balconies, while there is a rear yard variance being requested, there's not a variance to have a balcony, and the balconies themselves don't extend into the rear yard variance. With that, Madam Chair, I'd move approval subject to the proposed dwelling being constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated November 18th, 2024, and the elevation drawings dated November 6th, 2024, and that the approval expires in 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Chalowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Now we'll move on to CAV 003 of 2025. Mr. Hicks, I recognize that you gave us a joint presentation and that the variances are similar in nature. If you have no further comments with respect to this application in particular, we can move for a motion.
No, I think it's straightforward. As I say, there's just an existing carport that was being legalized on that other one. So,
okay, so there is the yeah, okay. Mr. Dickey, you have a question?
Yeah, to the consultant. I just have a concern about that side yard here. I accept the fact that 1.2 meter would be an acceptable, I don't mean acceptable, but would be a normal zoning thing, but the 0.5 meter, please convince me that's acceptable.
Well, I will convince you because it actually exists and it has for 15 years and it's been used as a parking garage for 15 years. And it actually came to the committee for a variance, whatever year it was approved. So our intent is to simply preserve it. So, and planning and zoning had said they couldn't deal with it as an existing non-conforming use for some reason. I'm not quite sure, but they said we had to deal with the front yards as if they weren't existing non-conforming. But it has been used as a garage for all that period. As I say, the property immediately to the east of it has a parking garage that sinks down slightly under a story. So it can all stay there and that really won't have any impact on anyone. So, but that is the existing setback 0.05. So, and as I say, it was approved by this committee. I don't have the date of that, but it wasn't approved variance by the committee. So,
in other issues like this, we have been concerned about how you're going to maintain that the east side of that wall, but it is a carport. It is a carport now, and it's going to continue to be a carport, so it won't
yes,
have a
no.
wall, it just have columns.
There are 2 columns on that side. You can actually reach them and paint them and preserve them from within the garage itself. There'll be, I'm not sure if there'll be a fence built on the adjacent property. I don't believe there is even one, but it is possible to maintain that from within the property line ourselves. And if there's any change to it, it will simply be to put like a wrought iron door on the front of it to prevent car thefts. So, if nothing else. So, but there's no sidewalls being built. So, it's really just a roof with columns on the edge. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any further items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We have no hands and we have no calls, Madam Chair.
Very well, then I'll take a motion. Mr. Tlaski, you are eager for both of them?
Happy to, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll again move this application to be approved. Finding that it meets 4 tests of the Planning Act. I don't see any adverse impacts from, again, this largely recreation of what exists today. Again, noting 2 letters of support and 1 presentation asking a series of questions, which I believe the applicant has addressed. I'd make the approval conditional on the proposed dwelling being constructed in general accordance with the site plan dated November 18, 2024, and the elevation drawings dated November 6, 2024, and that the approval lapses in 2 years if a building permit hasn't been issued.
Very well, thank you. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? See none, all those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Application CAV 004 of 2025 at 583 Taplow Crescent. Again, that's CAV 004 of 2024 at 583 Taplow Crescent. If anyone is interested in this application, please call 905-815-6095. Sorry. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instruction. Go ahead, Mr. Goral.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Tomasz Goral, and I am the applicant and agent for the homeowners at the subject property. We're asking for 2 variances. We've read the comments from planning staff. I'm not sure if they maybe completely understood the application, so we will go over it. But our 2 variances that we're asking for, one is for an increase in the residential floor area. Is it possible to rotate that PDF that's on the presentation? is it once it's brought up, so we're asking for an increase in the lower residential area. We're asking for, it's approximately 134 square feet. It's the size of just over a shed. The Ontario Building Code has adjusted that you can now build a shed that's 150 square feet without a permit, and this amount that we're asking for is in fact less than that. The diagram that we're looking at is the yellow part. If we were to shave the yellow part on this floor, and if you can please show the second slide, and this portion, we would be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. I feel that it just makes for better room spaces, and it is very minor in nature. So we were under the impression that asking planning staff to get their support first, 134 would have not been an issue. The second point that we're asking for, and this is where I think that maybe the application wasn't understood, is for a front yard setback. We're asking for, we're allowed 8.21, we're asking for 7.3, which is a difference of 9.1. But if we look at the slide number 3, please. What we're doing here, because this is a French chateau style of home, we're not asking for the relief on the front yard setback for the home. It's strictly for that canopy, which is above the front door. This canopy doesn't have piers. It doesn't go on both floors. It's just a modern box that's 14 inches high. And it's just you can see from the front elevation, that portion on the lower one, it's the side view. If you can please go to the third slide or fourth slide. And then on the other side, it's that portion. So I highlighted in green, that's the area that we're asking for the relief on the side yard setback, or sorry, the front yard setback, because city views it as if there's a cold room or if there's a roof. There's no cold room on this proposal, only this roof, and it's just to protect from the elements. And that is what we're asking for. If you could pull up the the site plan of the supporting documents that was uploaded for everyone to see, that would be great. It's not in this presentation. It's just in the supporting documents.
Thomas, we don't have that. We thought you just wanted these 4 slides.
Okay, well, that just showed basically from the site plan that the setback showed to the building, it's in compliance. It's only that roof that's not in compliance. And that's why when I read the report, it sounded like planning staff had thought that we were pushing the building forward, and that is not the case at all. It's just for that roof that we're asking for relief. Do you have any questions?
I apologize, I was muted. Mr. Dickey, you had questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Not concerned about the front yard setback having your explanation there. Not actually concerned about the residential floor area. The problem is when you come forward to us, you can look at the guidelines and everything else on design, and that's where we come and say we can try to impose some design guidelines particularly for the front of the house. My concern is you've got a one-story house, existing one-story house to the adjacent on both sides, I guess to the north and south, right? And your house, your building has no, we call it transition, no step downs at either side to help reduce the mass and scale of the house relative to the fact that you got one-story houses. I don't know if you were aware of that situation, that planning department and ourselves usually impose those type of design elements, but I don't see it in this house. Can you elaborate or convince me otherwise?
Yeah, so I've had other projects, same boat as this, that have been denied. I've watched other people get denied. I don't understand the reason why the city of Oakville has this issue with French chateau houses. With the French chateau, there's no dormers, there's no lower roofs, there's no steps in the front. It's a style of home, and I feel like almost that the city of Oakville planners are basically almost playing architect and imposing a certain style of house. And I find that this particular style is never approved, which I don't know why, because when you're building in southern Oakville, the beauty is you're demoing a bungalow and you're doing a home that caters to you and it's a reflection of your style and you want to diversify the street. I personally love driving down there, seeing the new houses because each house is a different style. It has a different story. If you go to a subdivision, they're all the same homes. There's no character there. And this is just a style of house that a lot of people do like. I mean, we did do the steps on the sides. It's not on the second floor. The roof isn't lower. I understand that. But it's a little frustrating that this style home never gets through because, like you did mention, you're okay with the front yard setback. You're okay with the little amount of area that we're asking for. It's just the style, and I just don't understand why this French chateau style is so nitpicked on in the city of Oakville.
Thank you.
Any further questions or items of clarification or comments? Okay, I see none. If no one is called with any interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer will take the matter into committee and will move a motion.
We've had no calls and no hands.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I echo Mr. Dickey's comments in response to the applicant. It's not a matter of the style of house. We have 4 tests. One of them is compliance with the official plan. Official plan states there should be compatibility, scale, height, massing, architectural character. This application provides none of that. So I don't know. There's been applicants come to the committee, as Mr. Dickey said, seeking a variance, but there's been no attempt to try to comply with the neighborhood as is directed by the official plan. So, Madam Chair, I cannot find that this application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and as such, I recommend denial.
Okay, is there a discussion on this recommendation?
Can I input anything else or no?
No, we've taken the matter into committee, Mr. Goralo, sorry. Is there a discussion on this recommendation from the committee members? Okay, I see none. All those in support of the denial of the application? Okay, and the chair abstains. And the application has been denied. I apologize.
Thank you.
Application CAV 005 of 2025 at 363 Margaret Drive. We do have a letter of objection from Don Robinson and Rod Murphy and Patricia Kirkwood. There is a request to attend as well. Again, this is CAV 005 of 2025 at 363 Margaret Drive. Go ahead, Ms. Zaharouk.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Cynthia Zahorak. I'm the architect for the project. The development is located at 363 Margaret Drive. The proposal includes a 3-story residential apartment building with 13 apartments of size and scale for families. These include 3, 4, and 5-bedroom apartment units, also including barrier-free units and fully wheelchair accessible common areas, corridors, lobby, and an elevator to access each floor. We designed a residential aesthetic, next slide, apologies. We designed a residential aesthetic for the building exterior, including using materials similar to the adjacent residential neighborhood, those being low maintenance brick and siding. We are incorporating sloped roofs and gables, evoking a small scale traditional house aesthetic. There are no balconies in this building, which reduces our cost in maintenance and overlook into adjacent properties. Next slide, please. I should say that the property is owned by the region of Halton. I should have said that initially. And it's been owned, the property has been owned for some time by the region. To the east of the property, now the red outlined block with the red spot on it, for lack of a better word, is our property. The property to the east, item 1, is the Margaret Drive Parkette. And this parkette is accessible only by foot from Margaret Drive. The current site-specific zoning bylaw for our site was established in 1969 and permits a 2-story building and up to 30 units. To the south are several regional housing developments, which are primarily low-rise, informed row house type. And this area is all zoned residential medium density and permits 3-story buildings. So that's all of the area shaded in block 3. There are a few single-family homes to the north on Elmwood Road, which back onto the proposed development. And there are large existing trees and fencing along that joint property line. There is a French school to the east, further to the east, which is accessed by Elmwood, and that's in block number 2. There are other primary and high schools to the southeast on the other side of Dorville Drive, but still within walking distance. So that makes this site ideal for residential development. Across the street from our site is the Margaret Drive Child Care Center. The next slide, please. This is our site plan drawing. North is generally up on the page. The site is 0.63 acres, and the proposed building, is shown in gray, comprises about 25% of the site area. There are 20 grade level parking spaces proposed on the east side of the building, in one parking area with a single access driveway from Margaret Drive. This parking area includes 2 barrier-free spaces for the residents, and Margaret Drive also permits street parking. 45% of our site is landscaped area, so that's outdoor amenity areas, green space, and planting and sodded areas. Along the north side, there are existing trees that we're maintaining. This is the property line that abuts the single-family residences along Elmwood Road. The next slide, please. Just briefly, our floor plans, on the left side is the ground floor plan. It consists of 4 units. Again, these are large units, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units. And also at the front right bottom corner is where we have residence indoor storage and the garbage area that is indoor, and the elevator and the main entrance. In lieu of balconies, we've proposed a common interior amenity area, which is in the light blue, top right of that ground floor plan. And all of these spaces are accessible to persons in wheelchairs. The upper, second, and third floors are virtually identical, with 5 units. Again, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units. On the north side of the building, there you can see there are 3 units. The 2 outside units have living room windows that face the park and face the street. So the only unit that has a living room space that faces north is the 1 unit in the center in the yellow. I know that there was a comment by a neighbor about privacy, so I just wanted to explain that. And again, there are no balconies for the units. Next slide, please. These are the 4 elevations. You can see that we've got a sloped roof configuration, gable roofs as well, which evokes that sort of traditional residential character, and a variety of exterior materials, including brick and siding and color panels. Next slide, please. So that we are requesting 2 variances to the site-specific bylaw. Variance 1 is with respect to the height of the building. Well, actually, variance 1 is with respect to the number of stories, not the height. The site-specific bylaw permits a building of 2 stories in height and or 15 meters maximum dimensional height. So our variance requests that you approve 3 stories within that 15 meters maximum height. This top elevation shows our proposal. So you can see that there are 3 stories, and the 15-meter height is maintained under the peak of the roof. The lower image is a previously conditionally approved proposal by another design team. It met all the requirements of the bylaw in terms of the number of stories, and it also met the requirements of the bylaw with respect to the overall 15-meter height. So this was conditionally approved. So the reason I show you this is because the initial building submerged the 3rd story into the ground by 4 feet, which meant that several of the units were effectively in a basement. So the windowsills in the apartments were 5 feet above the floor, and there were all the usual, negative connotations of basement living spaces. So this caused a problem when we came onto the project. When considering accessibility throughout the building interior, when the elevator is not operational due to, for instance, maintenance or power outages, which of course happens from time to time. When this occurs, those persons in wheelchairs that were, let's say, on the lower level, would not be able to get in or out of the building independently. So the decision was made to lift the building out of the ground and design the 1st floor so that wheelchair units were all located on the grade level. So in the event of an elevator outage, the exit is available without the need for the elevator or emergency assistance. All of our barrier-free or accessible units are located on this grade first floor level. Next slide, please. So the primary reason for this variance stems from the desire to have a fully accessible and safe building that eliminates unnecessary construction costs and provides long-term, low-maintenance buildings. This is, in this diagram, I'm trying to demonstrate something that's unusual about the bylaw. Again, this bylaw is a site-specific bylaw that only applies to this site. It restricts the building to 2 stories in height, but still permits the building to be 15 meters high. At the same time, it permits up to 30 units on the site, whereas we're only doing 13. So if we look at diagram 1 on the left side, this diagram shows how a building with a flat roof could have a mass that's up to 15 meters high, but still have 2 stories. The bylaw does not regulate the height of each story. Diagram 2 was the previously conditionally approved version of this design, which was effectively 3 stories, but the units were also located in the basement, which under the bylaw is not considered a story, depending on the placement of the ceiling. So this particular building, which was conditionally approved and met all the points of the bylaw, has 3 stories, but then has that basement living condition. The third drawing on the right side is our building that we're proposing tonight. So it still lies within the 15-meter height restriction. However, within that same volume, we have put 3 levels. So it's a 3-story building, but still meets the height. That's the variance we're looking for the 3rd story. I should reiterate that the lands to the south, the RM1 zone, also permit 3-story buildings. We are right adjacent to those properties. So we feel the 3-story building design meets the intent of the bylaw and the official plan, simply in the fact that it does not increase the permitted 15-meter dimensional height of the building. Secondly, it does not increase the density permitted on the property, which is 30 units. We are proposing 13. The proposed development does not increase the permitted height of the building beyond 15 meters and does not maximize the density permitted, and therefore the variance should be considered minor in nature. We believe it's a desirable development in that it satisfies a much-needed requirement for accessible family-sized rental housing. It's close to schools and parks and is within a suitable residential neighborhood, near bus service and walking distance to stores and services. The next slide, please. That's a reiteration of what I just said. So next slide again, sorry. Okay, variance number 2. Variance number 2 is a parking regulation variance. The Oakville zoning bylaw requires that for an apartment building, 50% of the required parking be covered with a roof or a carport or some other parking structure. The primary purpose of this regulation is to reduce the impact of large areas of parking in larger developments. So we believe that 20 parking spaces is not a lot, and in our opinion, it seems wasteful to build an entire roof structure over 10 parking spaces. So it would require a large roof structure that is visibly and arguably more imposing and obstructs light to the landscape areas of our property and views to and from the building. Moreover, it requires ongoing maintenance, higher construction costs, and does not really optimize the use of the site. The parking roof structure also creates maneuverability restrictions on the vehicles parked on the lot and headaches for snow plowing. Our proposal still provides the required parking spaces. So for the second variance, we feel that our proposal meets the intent of the bylaw and official plan in that all required parking has been provided. The variance requested is minor since it does not reduce the required parking and serves to make the parking more accessible, manageable, and reduces structures on the property and overall visual impact of the development. Next slide, please. Yeah. So some comments were received by neighbors, and I just want to briefly talk about them. Traffic and parking. Number one, the property is already zoned back in 1969 for an apartment building, up to 30 units. And therefore, there was no need for a traffic study when we are proposing only 13 units. And this was part of the pre-consultation we had with the town of Oakville. So a traffic study was not requested, and a parking study was not requested. We are providing all the required parking, so a parking study, of course, would not be required. The condition with respect to noise, the conditional site plan approval did not require a noise study. Again, the property is already zoned for an apartment use, and we're providing substantially less units than the bylaw permits. With respect to privacy, we do not have balconies on the project for the purposes of reducing long-term maintenance, and there are some existing very large trees along the north property line, solid fencing as well, and we have also proposed additional hedging along the property line as well as additional trees. With respect to with respect to shadows, we did do a shadow study and determined that our proposal did not cast more shadows than the fully zoning compliant proposal done in 2023. And the reasoning for that is that the height is still being maintained at 15 meters, despite the fact that we're doing 3 stories as opposed to 2 stories. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we feel that the 2 variances meet the 4 tests, and with respect to the general intent and purpose of the official plan, of the bylaw, and the development is appropriate, and the variances are minor in nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Zork? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Boy, I'm being a pain tonight, aren't I? I don't have a problem with the aspect of the parking situation. You don't want to build covered parking. There's not covered parking on the rest of the project, so I think that's consistent. I do have a concern, obviously, over the 3-story aspect of it. I just want to clarify something you said, which I wasn't aware of. Did you say that the other part of the complex where the townhouses are to the south, that's zoned for 3-story?
Yes, yes. If you recall the neighborhood map, adjacent to our property and all of the existing area, there is permits a 3-story building. So even though they are existing residential units, but if they were to be redeveloped, as of right, they could be 3 stories.
So I'm just thinking back. So a site-specific or a site-specific bylaw was passed back in the 70s when this was built, and they allowed 3-story buildings to be built where all the other townhouses are to the south. They turned around at that point in time, and on the subject property itself said only 2-story. And the only reason that I can think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the only reason I can think why they imposed the 2 stories because they back onto existing houses on Elmwood. And nothing's changed in that regard. That site backs onto the existing houses on Elmwood. So I don't see any other logic and any reason not to follow the logic of obviously decades ago, where they only wanted to allow 2 stories on the subject property. Just help me out here.
Well, I can only guess that's the reason. Again, that was 5.5 decades ago, and our zoning, our needs for housing have changed dramatically. This is an infill lot. I can only guess. But they allowed 30 units on the same property. 30 units. We are doing 13 units. So that's quite a difference in density.
Thank you. I'm wondering if I can ask the planner a question. In the planning report, again, you addressed the fact of perhaps it was mass and scale, and you said it doesn't have a detrimental effect or something on the streetscape, but you never turned around and mentioned this aspect relative, again, to the impact on the neighbors, the attached houses to the north. I'm concerned about that. The streetscape, fine, it's almost a collector street, but I'm really concerned about the houses to the north. You've got 1-story houses, I think there were side splits or ranch style houses there, and the planning department didn't mention any even that you even considered any impact on there.
For you, Madam Chair, thank you for the comment. I believe I wrote in there that there was a separation distance about 8 meters to the adjacent single detached homes, which allow for separation breathing room between the buildings and reduces any impact that is taking place on those buildings. I can understand concern with privacy impacts and stuff like that. She has mentioned that there are no balconies overlooking on these properties. The other piece I think that's important to note is that they are permitted to have 15 meters in height, and they are meeting that expectation. So it's really evaluating the impact of increasing the number of stories. So how many levels within that height is appropriate. And when evaluating that piece is when you can start to see that this could be appropriate in that context of meeting that height. So from my perspective, I think they have been sensitive to their neighbors, but I leave it in your hands for that evaluation as well.
It just on the height issue, 15 meters, I'm old fashioned, I'm really old I am. So 15 meters is 45 feet. There's no way 2-story building reaches anything near that. If you've got 10 feet each floor, that's 20 feet and maybe another 5 or 6 feet or 8 feet on the top, you're not going to exceed 30 feet. So the fact that they allowed 30 meters, it would never have been built. I'm sorry. The fact that they allowed 15 meters, it makes no logical sense that it would ever have been built that high for a 2-story building. So I just see that as it doesn't make sense that they'd say only 2 stories but allow 15 meters. That doesn't make sense to me. Those two numbers don't jive. Obviously, in this case, they're looking to say the 15 meters is the number that's allowable. I just say it would not have been achievable otherwise. So anyhow, thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Just give me 1 second, Mr. Ms. Buckerfield, I understand that the residential medium RM4 says 15 meters or 4 stories, but the special provision only lists 2 stories. So where does the 15 meters come in?
Through you, Madam Chair. So with that, the way the zoning bylaw works is you have your parent policies. So you would have what is permitted in the RM zone. And then when you have a special provision, it provides additional information, and it needs to conflict with information in the parent zone. So it conflicts with the idea of stories, so that now you've replaced your 4 stories and you have your 2 stories, but there isn't an additional requirement for the meters, so it doesn't have a confliction, and therefore that 15 meters still applies.
Oh, okay. Ms. Ora, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you. To Mr. Dickey, I just want to also bring to your attention that the properties where these small houses are, arguably built back in the 60s, are permitted to be rebuilt with 2-story buildings of 12 or 13 meters in height. So they could be rebuilt and up to that height, which is not far short of 15 meters. So. And I'm sure this is the evolution of the bylaw over the course of 50 years.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've seen that there's objection letters from the neighboring properties. Did your client, and particularly as a public agency, hold any consultation with the neighborhood?
No, we did not.
Thank you.
I believe, if I could, the neighbor, I don't know the addresses, but I think there's one neighbor that is on the north property line, or is immediately adjacent to our property. I think the other one is in a court somewhere. I don't know where that is.
Any other questions? Okay, I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called with interest for this application?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 2 hands and 1 call.
Very well. I'll leave the order up to you.
Okay, 1 moment. Charles LaForge.
Is that the phone call?
No, this is, he's just been promoted into the meeting, video.
Okay, very well. Mr. LaForge, if you could be kind enough to put your video on and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I'm unmuted, and I think you can see me now.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm one of the north neighbors on Elmwood there, so kind of sharing my property line directly with the subject property. And I think the first thing I want to say, just with respect to Cynthia's comment on, I can build up to 3 stories too. Like, I think respectfully, I own a single family home. It's a side split. We have 2 children. Oakville, it's expensive. We all know that. The thought that I'm going to kind of redevelop to 3 stories isn't really meaningful or important to me. I think what is maintaining the integrity of the neighborhood as it currently exists. I think Mr. Dickey mentioned that when we were looking at the at the prior building, just having consideration for your neighbors and what you're putting up there. And I think the idea of moving from a 2-story building, not a 15-meter building, because it's not realistic, as Mr. Dickey mentioned, but to a 3-story building, I don't view as a minor variance personally. I don't know what's qualified as minor versus major, but the idea of having a 3-story apartment building in my backyard or sharing a line with my backyard is one that's very concerning to me at this point as a resident and neighbor of Elmwood. I think if everything else in the neighborhood is 2 stories, that precedent, for the integrity of the neighborhood should kind of rule the day. The other comments I had with respect to noise and traffic, Margaret's a very kind of difficult street to navigate with parking on both sides. My neighbors share those, but those would be kind of my concerns at a first glance.
I believe the parking is on site for this development.
Sorry, I meant Margaret generally, right? For the other towns
okay.
that were there. I'm not concerned with the parking on site.
Okay. Okay, is that all? Because once you've given your comments, we'll pass it by.
Yeah, no, that's all for me. Thanks for the committee's time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Hang back. Who's next, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Yes, we have Wendy Funk Death. I'm going to promote her to panelist. She's a video.
Okay, very well. Go ahead, Miss Wendy.
I think I can hear me. Can you? I can't see me. I'm not sure whether I'm there.
No, we can hear you, but if you have the capacity to turn your camera on, that would be great.
Let's see if we can. Hi. Okay. Thank you very much for taking me on. Sorry, phone's in the way. I'm on 237 Elmwood. I'm on the other side. But my biggest concern, I understand the parking's on site, which I think is marvelous, and I'm glad that the proposed has gone from 30 down to 13. But the traffic in the particular neighborhood, we've had some issues with street racing, had some accidents with cars parked on the road. So the added extra traffic in the area is a concern to me. 13 is much better than 30, but still. I can't imagine my neighbors who are having a 3-story building in their backyard, even though it's 8 meters from them. That is concerning because it changes the outlook of the neighborhood. The parkette is and I understand it was from 1969, but things can change and be redeveloped at different spaces. The parkette is used by the community, and to shrink it down, I did not realize that in 1969 that was reserved for building, and I'm only just finding out about it now. The QR code that was developed for us to look at has been faulty. We're only hearing some of the information tonight in this video chat as to what was going on because we kept going on to it and we kept getting bumped off. So these are all my concerns. I'm hoping you can take them into consideration, and thank you for my time.
Thank you. Who's next, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Madam Chair, that is all. It was just the 2.
Oh, okay. So the phone call got dropped?
Yes.
Okay. Very well then. Okay. Ms. Orrick, you can reply to the concerns of the neighbors now before we take the matter into committee.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the second neighbor. Sorry, I misplaced her name here. But there is no, the property that we are redeveloping is not the parkette. This is a regional property. The parkette that's owned by the town of Oakville is further to the east. So we are not taking away space from the parkette. I also, I don't know if it's possible to go back to or if you could see, members of the committee, slide 8, because it really does speak to the difference between the irrelevance of the height, actually, whether it's a 3-story or a 2-story building. Because we're maintaining the overall maximum 15-meter height, we are virtually equivalent to the drawing in the center, which was a previously approved site plan with no variances, but maintained a basement level for the residential units. So by bringing the building out of the building, we are still maintaining the 15 meters, but we're also not putting units in a basement, and we're also able to provide safe exiting for units that are meant for people in wheelchairs. I think this massing is what's key. So the center diagram is showing that the 3-story building previously approved is the same height as the one that we are proposing. The height difference between, say, the floor of the 3rd floor and the floor of the 2nd floor of the previously approved building is like 1.5 meters. That's the only difference in height. So we're not talking a whole 3-meter story that it's higher. We're just talking about 1.2 meters of the floor level that's a little higher in our proposal. The mass is still the same. The mass can be 15 meters. There's no, we are not regulating or changing that regulation. So despite the fact that the houses to the north are 1.5 story, a building can come in here and can still be 15 meters in height. And that's all we're asking for, is the same height, but with 3 stories within the mass. So I think I'm hoping that you understand this drawing as we presented it, because it does show that the previously approved concept is identical in height. So if, I guess if we are denied this variance, we have to now go back to this 2.5 story version where we have a basement level and our units are in the basement. So it'll still be the same height. It'll still be 15 meters. It'll still cast the same, be the same massing and the same look from the neighbor's property. But the accessibility of the building will be severely diminished.
Okay. I still struggle with the fact that there was no community engagement and there was no effort to buffer a little bit, at least, for the community. I see your site plan. I see some of the trees that are remaining. I see the sitting area with the landscape, but surely some sort of screening could have been considered to maintain more of a privacy for these neighbors and kind of damper their fears a little bit.
Yeah,
and
I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Those are my thoughts. Anyone else before we take the matter into committee? Especially that there's no appeal now from third parties other than public bodies and the applicant themselves. I'd like to see that the region would make more of an effort to uphold the privacy of the neighbors. It's not as simple as saying if we're denied, we're going to go back to the same height and it's just going to be basement living for some of the tenants. I find that a little bit of an answer is a little bit callous, if I might say so.
Yeah, I apologize if it came across that way. I think we did many things that we felt mitigated the privacy, and one of them is eliminated balconies. We did our best to organize the floor plate so that the living spaces of the apartments were not facing in that direction, save and except one unit. And then we enhanced the buffer area. We kept the trees along the north property line, very mature trees, and except for, I believe, one that was impacted by the foundation of our proposed building. So, and we put in hedges. So we felt we had done quite a bit in decreasing the overlook and increasing the privacy to the people to the north.
Okay. Mr. Dickey.
Just going to make one little point, which I think started to sway me. It's this whole thing about 15 meters. There's no way that you're going to build a 2-story residential building that's 15 meters high. It's 49 feet. When your normal height, floor to ceiling height is 8 feet, and you add another foot in between the floors, so you're only talking 9 feet per floor. So it's 18 feet plus the roof. So when you say even your 1.5 or 2.5 story building would be 15 meters, I really have trouble accepting that, because they'd have to have 10 foot, 12 foot high ceilings, and you're not building, and you're concerned about cost. So you're not going to be building ceiling heights of that degree, because you also have to heat it. So when you're considering construction costs, you're not going to be building that high a building. So I just wanted to point out that's not swaying me one bit. That 15 meter thing has nothing to do with a viable, affordable housing development. So I'm back to the point of saying no. I'm fine. I would approve the parking, have no covering on top of the parking, but I will be voting to deny the 3-story. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments?
Madam Secretary, Cynthia's co-worker Naveen had her hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not seeing that on my panel. Yes, please invite her in.
Okay, one moment. Naveen Solomon.
Go ahead, Ms. Solomon.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. I just wanted to add one comment, and I think Cynthia already kind of touched on that, regarding the mature trees that are existing along the north fence line. So we are keeping most of those mature trees, which provide a lot of privacy for the homes on the north. We are only removing some of the trees that are either in poor health condition or in the construction zone, but most of the mature trees are there. And we did a survey of we have some photos that we could share. If you can please show the slides starting from page 15. So if you can see, these are photos that we took for all the houses along the north fence, and the house numbers are shown with all the trees that are there right now. Of course, it's winter in in spring, these trees are fully mature and they provide a lot of privacy. You can scroll, please. So all these trees are staying. Next slide, please. And even if you look at our site plan, in the area where there is no trees right now in front of the house 258, we are planting new trees in our site plan application. Please scroll, please. And in front of this house, we are also planting new trees. So there will be even better privacy, I guess, by planting these new trees. Next slide, please. Again, seeing the house numbers with the trees in front of them. And next slide. This slide is also meant to show the entrance to the park, which is shown in red, the public park entry. We are not affecting the park. All the work is to the left of the red line that is shown right now, which is the property owned by the region, and it's not the Margaret Park. Thank you. That's all what I wanted to clarify.
The proposed trees are to be planted as mature trees, or are we talking saplings? Because the mature trees we're looking at have had decades to grow. So what are those proposed trees? I understand that with your site plan, you have to go into a landscaping and provide all that, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, they are new trees. I don't have the types right now, but we've submitted our site plan application with those new trees, and there were no comments on the landscaping that's proposed.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there any questions of Ms. Solomon at this time? Or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Is there anyone else waiting to speak, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We have Alyssa Mahood, who also works with Cynthia, who wanted to speak.
Okay.
One moment.
Hi, great. Thank you very much. Alyssa Mahood, I'm with Halton Region. I'm a senior planner with Halton Region working with the capital construction team. And just going back to the comments and with regards to the height, again, we are looking at this site both from terms of compatibility with the adjacent stable low density residential neighborhood, but the key I guess issue for us right now is that we are trying to offer, as part of our portfolio for affordable assisted and supportive housing in Halton, is units that are fully accessible for wheelchair. We do have a number of, I guess, people who are on our hatch wait list that do have special abilities that need to be accommodated. So we're trying to design this building in a way which we can provide that on the ground floor. Because it's such a two-story or even a three-story building, it's very expensive for us to put an elevator in to get them to that ground floor if they need wheelchair accessibility. That is the main reason why we were asking for a variance from the provision that restricts us to that two-story, as opposed to, I mean, we could, like you said, I mean, we do have 15 meters in height. And really, essentially, we're looking at that 1.5 meter in excess of what's permitted. But I'm wondering if there's like a way that we could either maybe go back and take a look at our site plan. We have tried to figure out ways to design it, but maybe there's an opportunity to request a motion to defer a decision on this. And then maybe we could go back and talk to the planners and see if there's something that we can do to resolve the issue. But I guess I'm just trying to understand, it's not the story, it's the height. So that it's 15 meters height that is an issue. If we are going to be two stories we are essentially just bringing that building down 1.54 meters. That's really the difference that we're sort of talking about right now. So I guess, is it the additional 1.5 meters is it for the privacy, or what is I'm just trying to understand. So when we go back and take a look at this on how we can redesign it, if we even can, because I mean, we've already tried. That's why we came for the variance. We're not trying to get additional units in. We're not trying to add more units. It's a very small site that we're looking at, and we're not really proposing even up to the density that is permitted. So I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity to go back and maybe talk with Catherine and the planners at Oakville and see what we can do or whatnot. Or
I have two comments. So when you say that there is no accommodation in terms of an elevator, so this building does not have an elevator right now.
No.
The second thing is, in my frame of mind, the neighbors behind are mostly 1.5. They're not even 2 stories. So in my frame of mind, a 2-story already towers enough over a split home. So it's not really just the 1.5, but I'm sure Mr. Dickey has much more to say than I do with that respect. Mr. Talowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm of a similar mind of Ms. Mahood, and it was going to be my intention to move a deferral motion to stave off a denial motion, because I don't think this application should be denied. I don't think the flaw is the height. I think the flaw is the lack of public consultation with the neighbors. I think the applicant did an excellent job showing the difference between the previous site plan and the current one. Many of the concerns of the neighborhood, whether there's a variance or not, are going to be the same. I think none of us would be happy if we thought we had a park behind us and it turned out that it was a development site. The variance isn't causing that. There's always going to be that interface issue, whether it's the previous site plan or the one that's in front of us. But what I took from the difference between the previous plan and the current one, this building actually looks like it's smaller, but the massing's not all that different. And the key difference seems to be that the level of the upper windows are higher in this proposal than the previous one. And other than that, not a significant difference. And, it's unfortunate, 1969 bylaw. I don't know how we, determine whether they made a mistake and forgot to change the height limit, whether you could put ground floor indoor parking at that point wasn't considered a story, and that's why they left the height to accommodate for that. I don't think any of us will ever know that for sure, but it's the lack of consultation with the neighbors. Some things, like I say, will never be resolved to everyone's satisfaction, but I think there's some things that can be looked at, whether it's, can you make the units a little smaller and step back to the 3rd floor in the back? Can you raise the sill height of the windows to help offset any privacy concerns that have arisen from the difference in the building height? The surface parking, you can't build affordable housing with indoor parking. It's incredibly affordable. And for the committee, I think we need to balance the public interest in general, the public interest in terms of the immediate neighborhood. Nobody else is going to build 4 and 5 bedroom units. That's important to the overall public interest, but so is any immediate impact to the neighbors. So I cannot support a denial motion. I'm not sure I could move an approval motion tonight. I don't think this is that far off, but I think it needs a little more work. And so Madam Chair, when the opportunity comes up, I don't want to debate a denial motion. I prefer the opportunity to make it a deferral motion to give the region the opportunity to have some consultation with the neighbors and maybe make some tweaks to the design before it comes back to us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Does anyone else have anything further to add? Or is there anyone else awaiting to speak to the committee? I think the 3 people who are listed have spoken, correct?
Yes, we have no more hands and no calls.
Very well. Members, do you have anything further? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
I think I've already stated this. I would be willing to approve the parking aspect of the variant. And under the, shall we say, assumption, maybe incorrect to me, that then the Halton region could come back and possibly rethink this 2.5-story building and go through it without any more red tape from us. But then on the other hand, I agree that if they wanted to defer and they think they can come back, that they're gonna solve this concern and come back with something that we're going to agree with, that's great. I just I wanted to at least tell you what I you know, if it's 2.5-story building, you don't have to come back to us on that issue. So then you get ahead, you can continue with it. I realize you're going to have other problems, and I understand the accessibility thing. Maybe exterior ramps aren't acceptable in these situations. But I just wanted to tell you that to me might be a solution that I'm certainly willing to vote. So it's your decision whether you want to defer or have us make a decision. Thank you.
I think that if the opportunity is to defer, that we should entertain the deferral as a whole, because I'm certain that the plans will change and the drawings will change, and I'm not comfortable breaking it up. And I find that Mr. Talowski, and that's the benefit of planning experience, has offered a few examples of things that would mitigate the issues that the neighbors may have in terms of privacy and encroachment on their homes. And I think it is worth letting the region take a deferral and coming back with a more comprehensive and amicable, I guess, design. So it's your call. As you know, you have to officially ask for the deferral, and we'll take a vote on it. But you've heard from some of us, and it's really up to you now.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. Catherine
Yes.
Buckerfield, our planner for the town of Oakville, would like to speak.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Buckerfield. I didn't see your hand.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I had put up my hand just as a reminder that there is an ongoing site plan application process. That's another opportunity to make improvements to the property. And so I had originally put my hand up when you were having a conversation around the landscape piece. And I wanted to mention that there is an opportunity to have an approved landscape plan that has improvements through that process. And then also.
Oh, you froze. We lost you for a bit.
You've progressed the conversation since I had originally had that thought to bring it up. So you may want to ignore that, but I wanted to bring that up as something to be top of mind.
Okay, thank you. And that's fair. That's a good point to have. Okay, so barring the fact that I have not missed anyone else, feel free. Ms. Zurek, do you want to, you go ahead and tell us what you want. You're still muted.
I think it's agreed, and I'm just going to look at Alyssa there, that we defer the entire application so that we have an opportunity to speak to the neighbors to the north and see what we need to do to mitigate the concerns.
Perfect. Thank you. So the request is to defer, motion to defer. All, Mr. Towski, are you answering the motion, or you wanted to speak?
I want to speak. I would like to add to the motion to defer that nothing's more infuriating than government paying government. So if a deferral fee were to apply in this case, I would recommend that it be waived.
Okay, that's up to the panel. Let's decide on the deferral first, and then we can decide on whether or not the application fees apply. So the motion is to defer. All those in support? Okay, so the deferral stands. With respect to the fees, how do you all feel? I suppose, I mean, it makes sense. It is the Halton region and it is the town of Oakville. They're all part of the same. I'm okay with that. If everyone's okay, then we will defer the fees and the region will come back with a more comprehensive plan at the time that the Secretary Treasurer will find time for them. Okay. We'll see you all soon, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are at application CV 121 of 2024. It was deferred from October 16th of 2024 at 2515 Royal Windsor Drive. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joseph Guzzi. I'm a planner with Dillon Consulting, and I represent the applicant, Nicola Royal Windsor II Limited. They're the owners of 2515 Royal Windsor Drive. And for your records, my address is 235 York Glen Boulevard, Suite 700, Toronto, Ontario, M2J4Y8. Since our last meeting on October 16, we have been able to consider some of the concerns that were expressed by the committee and have provided some additional information. With me tonight is also Mr. Peter Nikolakakis, who is the Executive Vice President of Development and Planning at First Gulf. And he is also representing the developer as well as the landowner. And with the committee's permission, I would like to have Mr. Nikolakakis speak to the development before I speak about the additional technical materials that have been provided to the committee.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Nice to meet the committee, and through you, Chair, I have just a few points I'd like to bring to this meeting, and then if there's any questions at the end, either Joe or myself can answer them. So as Joe mentioned, my name is Peter Nikolakakis. I'm with First Gulf, and we're here representing the owner, Nicola Royal Windsor II Limited. They are a trusted partner of ours and owners and operators of 8 self-storage facilities in the Vancouver area. And this proposal is actually their first in the GTA. You probably know that First Gulf is a local developer and contractor, being a significant builder of both office and industrial and retail in Oakville, along with our sister company, Great Gulf. And we love and have worked for many years in Oakville. With regards to this file, this application, we submitted initially our site plan back in July of 2022. And prior to our third submission, which was about 10 to 12 months after the original submission, Peel Region, who governs and oversees Winston Churchill, identified a mistake that was made with regards to the width of the right-of-way that was required. And it put a 2-meter pressure on the site plan and required us to revisit the site plan along with the town and the region. And ultimately, because of the complications of the building, the logistics of how a multi-storied self-storage facility is designed logistically inside and outside, we looked at and worked with the town and the region to shift the building southwesterly, bringing it closer to the westerly lot line, giving the region the required additional setback requirement, and helping to promote a better urban design and kind of landscaping plan along both Royal Windsor and Winston Churchill. Again, these buildings are interesting logistic kind of operations, in that there are components of the building that are prefabricated, and for reasons of accessing various units, the fact that the building has a drive-through and a drop-off that's internal to the ground floor. We looked at different ways of how we can accommodate and meet the request of the municipality. So, and this is all factual, and planning staff were very helpful to work with us. So ultimately what happened was we have a series of variances, and one of the variants in particular is a 1-meter setback from the westerly lot line. And this is, for us, quite typical and normal in an urban condition. It's a part of the building that we can demonstrate, and Joe has in his presentation, if needed, a few images to show how we can have swing stages and or maintain the westerly wall. It's a metal cladded wall, and it can be serviced and or managed and operated from above or from below. And that was one of the things I believe that was brought up in the previous C of A meeting. The neighbor to the west at 2481 Royal Windsor is Mancor. It just happens that the owner and applicant of this self-storage facility also owns the neighboring lands. And that business has a long-term lease that'll take it well into the 2030 years, beyond 2030, and operates and manages both properties. So Joe can speak in greater detail to some of the variances if it's required, but I will just echo what is actually in the staff report, which is that the 4 tests have been met, both individually and cumulatively, and that we've had a great working relationship with both the town and the region. We would love to see this project move forward, and hope that you would agree with us and provide us an approval. If you have any questions, happy to answer them on behalf of the ownership. But again, if there's any planning or technical questions on the variances, I'll hand it over to Joe.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Nicola at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Did you say that the adjacent property to the west is owned by the same property owner?
Yeah. Through you, Chair, yes, correct. It's the same owner.
So rather than, you want to build a certain building of a certain size, why don't you just go and come in for a severance and add a meter or 2 on the west side? Take it away from that property to the west and add it to your property. It's all the same owner, you see.
Well, through you, Chair, it's for whether it's legal reasons, tax reasons, or ownership reasons. Also, because there's an existing long-term lease with the existing tenant, we feel that there's no need to do that. We've, again, working with planning staff, both at the town and the region, thought the more appropriate method here would be to go through with a variance. And then we're not impacting the property next door. Also, I would suggest that, quite frankly, we don't need to go into another kind of legal process to generate a fictitious property line that would impact the Mancor lease. I think on its own, its merits, we meet the four tests, and we don't really need to look at other kind of legal means to create a process that's not necessary.
Well, I'm going to tell you right up front. You're building a building bigger than what the site will allow. You're asking for variances on both sides, and you're asking for a height. I can live with the height because it's a corner, but I'm just not. I could even live with the variances along Winston Churchill, but on this west side, I can't live with. So I'm telling you right up front, I'll be voting to deny because you've only got a 1 meter wide setback on that west side. Thank you very much.
Right.
Do we respond to that, or?
Yeah, if it's yes, I guess, because you know, Mr. Guzzi, you still have to address other things. But go ahead.
I'll allow Joe, through you, Chair, I'll allow Joe to respond to the technical means, but we've gone through a due process. We've been at this for a few years. We have the support of staff. This is the nature of what we're asking for, which is a variance. We feel that it can be easily accommodated by way of us showing or proving, and I think that was one of the takeaways from the last committee meeting, how one would take care of that western facade. It is the equivalent of a party wall condition, but we are away from the property line. It can be maintained, like I said, as an example with the swing stage. It's an urban condition, and this is what meets the four tests and what the through staff, a supportive staff. It's not something we're trying to impose on. Again, this condition was created by us accommodating the region and shifting the building for them. So I'll let Joe maybe continue and answer from a technical planning perspective.
Sure. Thank you. So I'd like to just add that based on our review, based on the review that the city has done extensively through the site plan process, the side yard condition is such that it does not have any adverse impact on the adjacent property. That side yard is not required for any circulation. That wall is just a blank wall. There's no access. There's no windows. The 1 meter setback is an appropriate size in order to ensure the property is drained properly. We've been working extensively with the city's engineering department, and we've demonstrated and they've accepted our proposed drainage for that part of the property. So technically there's no adverse impact in terms of drainage. There's no impact in terms of overlook. The 1 meter setback is an appropriate space for allowing the building to be constructed. We had forwarded to the committee a construction management plan, which is on page 12 of the slide, but I believe it was also in your package. The engineers who've prepared that have demonstrated that the building can be constructed and maintained within its own legal property limits without any implications to the adjacent property owner. And in this case, actually, we have a friendly property owner because they're related. So there's another reason why there's going to be no adverse impact. It's a condition where the different property owners, though they're separate companies, have a friendly relationship. And if there's any need for any coordination, it can occur. And also the construction management plan shows that through the use of roof cranes. The building cladding can be installed, and any maintenance that is required can occur within its own property limits. And I just wanted to point that this is a very low maintenance building. It's just a blank wall. Now, we've been working with the town staff extensively, not only in terms of that side wall condition, but also in the building, how it's been designed, how it's been articulated, in order to make it in order to make it appealable and so it's properly articulated to enhance the pedestrian experience. A lot of landscaping has been included in this building. Layers and layers of landscaping to make it very appealing for the pedestrian experience. And I like to point out that like the variances are minor in my opinion. In my opinion, they do meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And my submission is that it meets the 4 tests, and we're asking for your approval.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the provision of construction management plan, but it doesn't show how you're going to construct that building and maintain that building with a 1 meter setback. You referenced cranes, so they're not shown on the plan that we received. So can you walk me through like the method at which convince the committee that with the 1 meter setback, you can construct and maintain the building? You may have a friendly neighbor today. They're separate properties. You may not have one down the road. So if it sounds like you know how you can construct and maintain this, but that information hasn't been provided to the committee yet.
Yeah, I can speak to that through you, Chair. Obviously, there's different construction methodologies that can be applied, whether it's a steel or concrete type structure. In this instance, it would be a steel structure. So all that fabrication and joints and welding and all that material kind of connection would be done internally. And then depending on the type of system, so here it's a blank wall, you would either have a cinder block or depending on the type of construction methodology, if it's a drywall condition, that would all be done internally. And then from a swing stage on the top of the building, so the swing stage, as you guys can imagine, is the equivalent of what you see sometimes window washers use to come down a large tall building, which is less than 1 meter wide. They would be coming down and fabricating and putting on metal panels to complete the outside facade. So a lot of the work is done inside the building or in the building itself along the building line. And then the actual application of that metal panel is done from the outside. So then once the building is actually constructed, that metal panel would essentially never be touched. But in the event that it needed to, if it needed to be painted, if there was an issue with one of the panels, then again, from davits that are hanging over the building, that are inside the building, they swing out, you drop a swing stage and actually are able to manage that. On the ground level, through what Joe had suggested was that there was a back and forth with town engineering staff, and we've identified and demonstrated how drainage would work, stay within the property line, and how it would exit out, whether to Royal Windsor or Winston Churchill. So the plan does show or demonstrate that area, and there's some images that are also in Joe's presentation that you would have that show some visuals of a swing stage along a similarly platted building. So if you want, we can provide more of that, but again, we build offices in much more constrained sites here, say in the city of Toronto, where I'm currently sitting, where you have a 0 lot line condition, and many times you're doing this from inside the building in a condition where you can't hang over even a centimeter.
Any other?
Actually, if the committee allows me, I would like to show that image. It's on page 13 of our presentation.
The image on the left.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight this construction. This is an example, also a storage facility that I was able to locate. It's at 3524 Dundas Street West. And the image to the left shows the roof cranes that are used to install the paneling. And if you look on the image on the right, you can see that based on the construction fencing, that building is built right to the property line. So this is an example of the same type of warehouse type facility that is adjacent to the property line. And it just shows how it is constructed using those roof cranes. So the images to the left and to the right is the east side of that building, and the image in the middle is the west side of the building. That's west side of the building has a little bit more space. I believe that's it was like 5 feet, but on the east side, which is the photo on the right, it's right along the property line. So as Peter mentioned earlier, this is pretty common in a urban condition, and it is able to be built and maintained all within its own property.
Thank you. That's helpful. We didn't get these images in our package.
Okay, I see none. Has there been any calls or any interest in this application?
We have no hands and no calls, Madam Chair.
Okay, who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Feel like I'm taking up more than my share of the oxygen tonight. Madam Chair, I supported the deferral last time. I've listened to the information provided. I've noted comments made in the staff report. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this application be approved, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and make that subject to 3 conditions. First, that development be constructed in general accordance with the approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Development, that the approval expires within 2 years, the building permit has not been issued, and that a construction management plan which confirms that the building can be constructed and maintained within the limits of the subject property form part of the site plan agreement, again to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Development. And I would note that there's no input from the public on this matter.
Okay, is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? All those opposed? And the chair abstains. Your application has been approved.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much.
Application CAV 161 of 2024, deferred from November the 13th of 2024 at 12 Rain Avenue. Again, that CAV 161 of 2024, deferred from November the 13th at 12 Rain Avenue. Mr. Castillo, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Gerardo Castillo from Keystone Home Designs. I'm representing the homeowners for 12 Rain Avenue, Mr. and Mrs. Walia. I'll keep it short. It's been a long day. We deferred this from November, I believe. We were going for Ross floor area. We reduced the area based on some comments that planning had. We've been in touch with the planning department, so we went back and forward, trying to see, what could we do with the homeowners, and where we could cut down in the space. And we came with this new solution. We reduced the space, so now we're only going for 1.93%. So which is about we're almost about 145 square feet over the maximum GFA. If you scroll down the submitted drawings, you can see on the render what we try to do on the elevations is to maintain a design that it's small in it will look small in mass. You can please scroll down to one of the renders, the front render, and you'll see we use the like a roof, slope roof over the garage, and we lower soffits on the main building. So I'm not sure if you can see that. You only see in the site plan, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it possible to scroll down the drawings down to the 3D renders?
I think the town staff is trying to do that. There we go.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, yeah, we're using a lot of lower soffits to reduce the mass, especially on the left side on top of the garage. And we do the same thing at the back, which is where we were going back and forward with the planner. So you can scroll down to the back of the building. What we did, we have an open to above great room that you can see there. It had the full height as the rest of the building. So we lowered that roof as a suggestion from one of the planners. We lowered the big window. That way, nobody can fill that space later on the second floor. And it reduces the scale towards the neighbor. Again, this is just a 3,200 square foot home. There's nothing fancy to it. Based on what's on the street and what was been approved, I believe, earlier in the year, the minor variance of 150 square feet, 145 square feet, it's pretty minor in nature. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Castillo? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called in?
We have no calls and no hands, Madam Chair.
Okay, then we'll entertain a motion. Would like to move a motion. Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application, site plans, the building elevation, my site visit, together with the presentation by the owner's consultant and the planning staff's report, I'm satisfied that the variances are minor in nature, conforms to the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I put forth a motion that the application is applied for be approved, subject to the condition that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the revised site plan dated November 18th, 2024, and the revised elevation drawings dated November 17th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision. Building permit not being issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? See none, all those in support? The application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good evening. Thank you.
Madam Secretary Treasurer, let us know. Oh, no. Skipped a step. We have minutes to confirm on December the 11th, 2024. Mr. Hardcastle usually confirms my minutes. Anyone else would care to confirm my minutes? Thank you, Mr. Dickey. And then motion to adjourn, 4 minutes shy of our limit, 9:56, 9:57 actually, PM. We are adjourned.